Today helps me very much in my day-to-day business, but we're here to talk about interviewing. And Murrah mentioned an Orlando Montoya style, and I just sort of think it's cobbled together from those people that I listen to on the air doing interviews themselves. And so before I get to my tips of best practices, I thought I'd start out talking to you about who I admire as interviewers and what qualities they have that I try to incorporate in my own interviewing style. Of course, I listen to a lot of public radio. So a lot of the people I'll mention are on public radio, but they might not be people that you know because I do a lot of podcasting. And so one of the first interviewers that I really love is named Leonard Lopate, and he's at WNYC New York. And I first discovered him when I had satellite radio, and he's on satellite radio every day on the public radio channel. But I like his personality, the fact that he has a personality. So many interviewers do not have personality. They try to take themselves out of it. And it's a very fine line between putting yourself in the interview and letting the interview subject shine for themselves. But Leonard Lopate does that in a very deft and erudite way. And one of the typical things that he might do would be he'd be interviewing a subject. They're talking about, let's say he's interviewing Mel Gibson. And he's got a prepared list of questions. He's got a list of things that he wants to get through. But Mel Gibson will say something about an actress that he worked with or a producer that he worked with years ago. And Leonard Lopate might remember an interview that he did with that person, or might remember some other fact about that person. And he will bring that into the interview spontaneously. And that's what I mean by personality. You know, that could only happen with Leonard Lopate because he interviewed that person, he interviewed person B before, and now he's interviewing person A, and he puts it together. So that's one thing I admire about him, is his broad knowledge, and he brings it together. So when you do interviews, one thing that I would take from him would be to don't let the questions just sit there on the page and you go through them like this. If somebody says something that brings up a memory, even if it's a memory in your past, say Mel Gibson, say you're interviewing Mel Gibson, wouldn't that be nice? Everybody's interviewing Mel Gibson, and he mentions something about ice cream, okay? I don't know if it's pertinent, if it will add something to the interview, bring up your own ice cream memories or something. You know, just a little personality goes a long way. A gentleman named Rick Clough is a local interview personality in Vancouver, British Columbia. Now, I have no reason to listen to what's happening in Vancouver, British Columbia. I've visited the place twice. I like it, but I don't live there. Do I really need to know about the politics in Vancouver, British Columbia? Do I need to know about the street patterns in Vancouver, British Columbia, or the latest happenings? No. I like to listen to Rick Clough, because he is a great interviewer. And one of the things I like about him is that he is, first of all, amiable. You can tell he's smiling when he's doing the interview. He likes what he's doing, and that's an important thing. If you're an interview subject, if you're interviewing somebody, you know, just smile to yourself, even though if you know that nobody can see you smile. Nobody knows you're smiling. Smile to yourself, because thank goodness you're interviewing this person. You got the interview, so smile about it. Rick Clough, he smiles, but also he has what I would call the minimalist approach to interviewing. He will ask very short, brief, direct questions, and I admire that. I was listening to an interview a few weeks ago that he did. And I swear to you, he asked the question, and then what happened? You know, sometimes the simple questions are just brilliant because they will allow the interview subject to expand. The third and final one that I mentioned that I wrote down before I came here was the late Tom Snyder, who had a TV show on late night TV back in the 80s when I was growing up, and I would stay up late to watch him. He also had a radio show. Now Tom Snyder is kind of like the opposite of the minimalist, because he would frequently interrupt the guest, or he would he had a very boisterous personality and would sometimes not overwhelm the guest, but you genuinely knew that Tom Snyder was having fun. He was into what he was doing, and he had a personality. I think he even smoked on his TV show. I mean, so what I'm trying to say is with these first three people is hope you can develop your own personality. Don't be afraid to put your own self into the interview. It can sometimes be a very help to your interview, and it will let your interview subject know that you aren't some mechanical robot that's reading a question, that you are a human being with emotions as well, and that you're connected with the person. Because that's, when you have a connectedness with the interview subject, that's going to produce a much better interview. And I'll go into that also in the rest of the presentation. I sort of organized the presentation into 5 parts in chronological order, from what you do way before the interview, to what you do before the interview, to what you do just before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview. So what you do way before the interview, of course, is make contact with the interview subject. This may seem like a very perfunctory and businesslike operation to do. You might think that it's just about calling and setting a date, but it's much more about that. You do want to contact the interview subject, but it's important to let your interview subject know in the first conversation what the expectations are of the interview. Not only the most obvious points, which are when, but also how. How long will you be interviewing the subject? Should the subject expect a 15-minute interview, a 30-minute interview, an hour interview, or a 5-minute interview? The focus of the interview is also very important. Now, with longer interviews, it's going to be quite expansive, and you don't have to get into specifics, but the shorter you get the interview, you want to make sure that your interview subject knows exactly what you're talking about. Like, for instance, today, I was mentioning that I used Evoca, and I was informed by the public affairs officer, I was calling some Army colonel, that I would have 5 minutes for my interview. Well, you know, I had been waiting all day for this interview, thinking up questions and thinking about things to talk about, and it comes back that I get 5 minutes for my interview. Well, in that case, you want to focus, and you tell the interview subject on first contact, even if you just have 5 minutes. Hello, my name is Orlando Montoya. I'm doing this interview subject, and we're going to talk today about, in this particular case, a study that was released about mental health screenings for soldiers deploying from Fort Stewart. So they know right away that this isn't an interview about post-traumatic stress disorder or life as a soldier. This is specifically just about the study, because I only have 5 minutes. And you let them know the format of the interview. Another important thing, a lot of people may not know if this is going to be recorded and aired as part of a documentary. Is it going to air as part of a series? Is it just going to be put on Evoca? Is it going to be put on a website? Let them know what the end product is going to be and how their words will be used, because that will make them feel more at ease. And at the bottom line of it, you want an interview subject that is at ease. And so if your interview subject is thinking during the interview, oh, I don't know, is this, in my case, a lot of people think I'm calling them up and it's airing live. So, I'm serious. I have to tell everybody that I call, this is not live, you're being recorded. I'm going to take a small snippet of what you say, maybe 2 snippets, 15 seconds long, and put them in a story. So let them, I try to be as specific as possible. So that's first contact. It sounds like a Star Trek movie. The number one thing you want to do. Also try to use first contact as your pre-interview. Tell the subject how you came to the subject, how you found out about them. Did somebody else tell you, refer you to this person? And let them know what your interest is. That will open them up. And you might ask them a few questions that you have, just sort of as a pre-interview. A lot of producers and network shows employ the pre-interview as a much more formal thing. I don't. I typically use a pre-interview just to find out a little bit about the subject and maybe 1 or 2 questions that we'll go through. But pre-interview can really help you out because they might say something that you didn't know. Because it's possible, believe it or not, that you don't know everything. So if you pre-interview your subject, don't make it a big to-do and hoo-ha. But I like to, for longer interviews especially, ask 1 or 2 questions that are my main points and tell them about me. Maybe this will set off, it'll put them at ease, but maybe it'll set off something that I can use later on. So then, step 2 would be just before the interview. This is in the preparation stage now. Now you're researching, you've made contact, you've hung up the phone, and you're preparing for the interview. I would say to get to know your subject, but you don't have to be an expert. And what I mean by that is you want to know, you first of all want to know what your audience is. And if your audience is familiar with the interview subject, how deep do you want to go on this interview? Say, for instance, you're in a highly technical field, and you know that your audience already knows about, the basics of this technical field. Well, you don't want to spend time in your interview asking questions about the basics. So, in your research, you want to go a little bit deeper. But what I try to do in this research phase is try to make up questions that will help the interview. But you want to make sure that they're broad questions, right? If you want specific questions, that's going to set off. It might be a little too technical for some people. So, in my case, Georgia Public Broadcasting, I know that my listeners are generally well-educated, knowledgeable, and I'm paying you all compliments, by the way.
Thank you.
And they know already about the way government works and certain things. So I don't want to approach it from a specifically basic point of view. So when you're developing your questions in this research phase, you're also researching and developing questions. You want to try to stick to how and why questions, because they are far more going to elicit a better response than who, what, when, where, why questions. Now, if your goal, and this is another thing, during this research phase, you want to establish what your goal is. Say, for instance, my goal is very specific. I know that I have an audience that I want, but what is the focus of this interview? If I'm interviewing somebody like today about well, let me give a specific example. I'm interviewing somebody about the civil rights struggle in Brunswick, Georgia. I want to make sure that I'm not spending my time interviewing somebody about the civil rights struggle in general. I want to make sure that we're focusing just on what happened in Brunswick, Georgia, and how it relates to the civil rights struggle nationally. So I filter all my questions through this prism of what is the focus. And once you might not know the focus when you make first contact, but as you're doing research, you're going to find out more, and you're going to definitely develop a focus. And that focus statement will guide you in your questioning. So a good rule of thumb is not to have more than a page worth of questions. You know, I mean, it depends on how long your interview is, obviously, and what your interview subject is doing. Like if this is a very verbose talker or not. But in general, the who, what, when, where, why, the who, what, when questions are just going to fall like a big old dud. Like today, again, I go back to this military interview that I was conducting. I only had 5 minutes with this guy, and what did I choose to ask him? After I asked the main question, which the main point, my main question was, what are the conclusions of this study? What do you hope people take out of it? That's the main question. Because he wrote this study, he's got a main point that he wants to deliver, I want to get his main point. So after that question, by the way, he answered that question very quickly. I came up on the spot with 2 or 3 on-the-spot questions. You see, when I did this interview today, I whittled it down. When I found out I only had 5 minutes, I whittled it down to 5 questions. Well, I asked that first question, and he got done with it like that. I mean, it was like a 20-second answer, 2 sentences. Not good enough. I'm going to need more. So I asked 2 or 3 follow-up questions. But after those follow-up questions, we're now 2.5 minutes into the interview. We're halfway done. I'm getting to my second question, basically. And the second question that I had prepared. And the second question that I had prepared was a big dud. I asked him, what did I ask him? When did you come up with the idea to do this study, or how did the study come about? Something like that. When? It was a when question. It was when did you come up with this idea to do this study? And oh my God, he just went on and on for like 3 minutes describing I was in Fort Stewart and you know, I was working for this guy and we got directives from up above and there's this new policy. It's all quite good and well, but in retrospect, if I had to do it again, I wouldn't have asked that question because it was a question that was a when question because, you know, he's just going to go on about facts. And at this point, if I've only got 5 minutes, I want to get, is it really about facts? You know, it's about getting something that I can use on the air. And hearing his story about when he was at Fort Stewart and how it came about, I probably shouldn't have asked that question. But to his credit, I stayed on the phone with 10 minutes with him. He was pretty accommodating. So we're still in the before phase, and what we're doing. So this is a good transition to talk about quick interviews versus long interviews. If you know that you're only going to get 5 minutes with somebody, you want to do the main points questions. What I mean by main points questions is, okay, you know what this guy is going to say. You know what it is because you've done your research. So if you're doing a short interview, your main objective is to get a usable product. And what I mean by usable product is something it's not something that is somebody talking about facts and figures and who and what and when. You want to get to the main point. So you ask your subject, you know, what is the main point? You know, say I'm interviewing Murm about Evoca. If I only have 5 minutes with Murm about Evoca, I'm going to say, what is the main point about Evoca that you want to share? I don't want to ask that question, but you want to ask a question that gets them to give their elevator speech, gets them to get to their main point. Because at 5 minutes, it's really not a conversation. It's just getting in and out, getting what you need. So the longer you get in this pre-stage of coming up with your questions, the longer your interview is, then the more nuanced and the more emotion you want to put into your questions. So you want to ask, for instance, we've got Alec Boyle here that we're going to talk about, John Fremont later, but you want to ask, that's when you'll get into your detailed questions about John Fremont and what he did back when. I have some bio notes. You might ask about the bio. But if you only have 5 minutes to ask about John Fremont, what you're going to do is you're going to ask about how you became interested in John Fremont and what are some main points about John Fremont. And you're not going to ask him in that way, but you're going to ask questions that are going to be eliciting responses that will get them to give their main points. So again, bottom line, short interview, main points. If you're doing a long interview, then you're going to have more questions with more emotion. So then, now we get to, you've done your research, you've formulated questions, and you always want more questions than you think that you're going to need. Because you can always drop questions. If you don't, and if you have too few questions, you're going to end up sounding dumb. Because you're going to come up with some question on the spot that I guarantee you will not be based on research and will cause you great embarrassment. So have more questions than you need, but once you get through these questions, don't send them to your interview subject. I know a lot of interview subjects will say, can I have the questions beforehand? I think I've only done that in 2 cases in my entire 12-year career here as public radio. I think one of them, believe it or not, was Paula Wallace, president of SCAD, who insisted on having the questions beforehand. I've only interviewed Paula twice in 12 years. She's a very hard interview to get. So I basically flexed my rules for that. And the other person the other Paula I've interviewed twice too. She's right over there. But generally, you don't want to give your interview subjects the questions beforehand. And you may seem like you're doing them a favor by giving them the questions beforehand. You want to tell them what the subject is. You want to tell them what the subject is. You want to tell them what kind of questions you're going to ask. But please don't give them your questions in writing beforehand, because what they might end up doing is writing their answers beforehand. And I have had. In the one other case that I remember giving the interview subject the questions beforehand, he kind of insisted on having the question beforehand. He came in with written answers, and he started reading. And this is very, very, very bad, because when people read, they are talking with a different voice than they're talking when they're talking. People always tell me, Orlando, you sound so different in person than you sound on the air. Well, that's because I'm reading on the air. Every word you hear me say on the air is written in front of me. You have a different voice when you're reading. So don't give out your questions beforehand. So just before the interview, right when you arrive at the person's house, or when you call them for the interview, let the subject know they're being recorded, maybe edited. Be on time for the interview. Don't show up late. And here's another trick that I use. Never show up with the microphone out. I found that if I come and I'm wearing my microphone and I got the microphone out and I start approaching you, hello Youssef, we're going to start interviewing you today. That's going to put you on a little unease. That's going to put you off. So I put the microphone in my pocket and I don't take it out until we're sitting down and talking. Make small talk with the interview guest. Notice what's in the room. I remember once I was interviewing a World War II Liberty ship builder, a lady who built Liberty ships back here during World War II. A lot of women were employed as Rosie the Riveter, putting together Liberty ships. And before I interviewed her in her house, I was noticing the people on the wall, and I asked her, you know, who's this? And it sparked a memory about her working in Jessup. And so I worked that into the interview because it turned out that what she had to say was quite interesting and I wanted to know about it. So when you notice what's in the room, and if you're doing this on the phone, maybe even ask if you have the time, you know, tell me where you are. You know, where are you? Are you in a roundabout in the middle of Trafalgar Square, or are you in your office? So that's, again, a little small talk before. Also, the microphone sort of puts people off. I remember there was one school superintendent here in Chatham County that really had an aversion to the media. I'm not going to tell you who that was. But I remember once we were doing an interview, and she was in another room, and there was a group of about 3 or 4 reporters in this room, and she walked in and she goes, "Ooh, media!" And she just saw the televisions and the microphone, and she was just all in hives about the media. So remember that your microphone, your television camera, your cell phone, whatever you're doing is a physical thing. It's an emotional thing in the brain that causes people to freeze up. And so you want to introduce that thing very slowly. And if you're on the phone, if you're doing it on the phone, what that means is don't call over to, in my case, Evoca. Don't call into Evoca like 10 seconds after you know, hello, I'm Orlando Montoya. Hold on, I'm putting you on Evoca. You know, or hi, I'm Orlando Montoya. I'm starting interviewing you right now. No, take a minute or so, calm things down, introduce yourself, tell the person what you're about, and then go to the interview. So now, probably what you've all been waiting for all this time. During the interview, what do you do? Number one is to, it sounds very simple, but listen. Put an exclamation part after that, because sometimes you have this list of questions that you're going from, but you're missing what the person is talking about, and you're looking at these questions because you're just trying to get through the interview. If somebody says something that you want to follow up on, don't be afraid to tell them that, to go off your question list and to ask about it. And if somebody is telling you something that you don't understand, for goodness sake, tell them, you know, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you just said. Can you kind of explain it? You might want to, in fact, play dumb. That's the other big trick to interviewing. It may sound like a contradiction, right? You just did all this research. You have all these questions. You know all about your subject. And then you want to get into the interview and ask them, tell me, you know, tell me how that works, or why. Or you want to ask them some basic question. That is because you're doing that not for yourself, you're doing that for your audience. Of course, I mentioned before, know your audience. If you know your audience already knows that stuff, then don't ask it. But in my case, I know if I'm talking about, I don't know, harbor deepening, and somebody mentions EIS, and you have to stop and say, I'm sorry, can you, and just tell us please, what is EIS? Okay? Somebody says something you don't understand, ask it, and tell them you don't understand it. that'll ease them too, right? Because if you say, I don't understand something, you're admitting kind of you're subordinating yourself in this relationship role so they feel more confident, so they're going to give you a better answer. In other words, don't try to approach it like you are trying to pounce on this person, because you've seen those interviews on TV where it looks like the interview subject knows everything and is just ready to pounce and to seize out a word and get around to it, so that the interviewer, is above the interview subject. No, that is not your role. That's at least not what I think is my role. All the great interviewers that I know don't think of themselves as trying to be above the interview subject. They are there to learn from the interview subject. And if they have to act stupid to get the best sound and the best interview, then they do it. Think about Larry King, you know? How many times have you looked at Larry King and you said, did he just ask that question? Really, but Larry King is a great interviewer because he would ask the question, it would help you, the viewer, understand. So, listen and play dumb, 2 good tips. Interruptions. Now, there are different theories about interrupting your interview subject, and you may take from one or the other. One theory says that you should interrupt the interview subject, unless, of course, they're going on and on. But you want to give the interview subject as wide a latitude as possible to convey what they are talking about in the manner that they want to talk about it. In other words, you don't impose the way you want them to answer. Let them answer the way they want to answer. Well, you know, the caveat, of course, is that if they're going on too long, you got to stop them. But the corollary, the opposite of that, the opposite idea of that is the idea that you, as the interviewer, are standing in for the audience. And you want to be as conversational as possible. That's another thing that you want. It's very important. You don't want to act a robot. You want to be conversational. So in a conversation, if you and I are talking, then I might interrupt you. I might say, stop, hold that, wait a second, right in the middle of a sentence, because that's what people do in conversations. So if you want to be conversational and be an advocate for the listener, then if somebody says something you don't understand, say, hold on, stop it. Can we go back? That's the type of interruption that some interviewers like and some interviewers don't. Me, for my part, it depends on what kind of an interview, what kind of time I have. I always, myself, I prefer to give the subject as wide a latitude as possible and let them talk as long as possible and not interrupt them. I just let them go. But if I know that I have a brief period of time, I will definitely interrupt. So there is a case to be made for interrupting and being conversational and being an advocate for the listener, because that's really what you are. One thing that another sort of thing that is up to the interviewer is taking notes. Some people take notes during interviews, some people don't take notes. And I've looked online and do the different things that people do. Some people like to take notes, some people don't. Position for taking notes would be that it's easier later to find out where in your interview you said what. But I personally, and I would say probably 90% of the people in my position would tell you to take notes. But I myself prefer not to take notes because it distracts me, quite frankly. Then I start paying attention to what I'm writing about. I know that what I'm doing is being recorded and I can listen to it later. And if I want to take notes later, then good for me. Then I can organize myself later. But during the interview, I try to focus on listening. just to speed it up a little bit, because I could go on. Remember that you're speaking to one person. And this is often something that people in radio forget. I forget it myself sometimes. I will say, we. Thank you for joining us. Something we're interested or something we'd like to know about. I just use the word I, you and I. It's you and I having a conversation. And we can, for the moment, forget that there are listeners out there. Because if you and I are having a conversation, it's going to be a lot more pleasant experience for the listener than if we are having a conversation. Because it's the royal we doesn't work. It sort of sounds pretentious, and it really, the closer bond you get to your interview subject is the closer bond you're making to your listener. Don't read the questions verbatim from your list that you've already made. You want to sort of be spontaneous and natural. Maybe write down a few thoughts, but don't write the questions out so that they're 5 sentences long, right? Terry Gross is really bad about that. She has these questions that go on for 10 minutes, you know. Oh, tell me, you were back in there, and sometimes people think this, and I've heard about this, and so tell me about that. It just goes on forever. Just ask the question. So keep it short, and don't read those questions verbatim if you can avoid it. So now you've done the interview, and what do you do? Well, there might come a time during the interview when you've reached a dead end, and your interview subject, believe it or not, is a dud. And he or she is not giving you what you want, is being a big old robot, answering very short questions. One thing that you can fall back on are a couple of questions, a couple of ideas. One thing I learned at a science workshop, for science reporting, was if you can't make it about the science, then make it about the scientist. In other words, if I'm interviewing you about Think Savannah, and this is just, you're not into this conversation, and you're just giving me one-sentence answers and stuff like that, well then turn it around. Let's not talk about Think Savannah. Let's talk about how you got interested in Think Savannah. Okay? So I remember once I was talking to this lady about ticks. She was not, ticks, my goodness. So she was being very scientific on me and just not giving me any good stuff. So I just turned around and I asked her, how did you get interested in ticks? Tell me about when did you get bitten by a tick for a first time? So she went off on that, and I got great stuff about ticks. So then after the interview, you want to give your card to the subject and thank them. Send them a follow-up email. So there's about a couple, 5 minutes left. Any questions you want to ask about me or interviewing?
Yeah, quick question. I'm thinking of interviewing all my relatives before they die. And I already approached my mother about this, and she ran away. She didn't want to have anything to do with this. How would I approach my mother and get her to do it?
Well, why are you interviewing your mother?
Because I wanted to tell her life story and get it on record. A lot of people, relatives, to hear it after she's gone, basically.
Well, I find that a lot of people are embarrassed by mine. A lot of people are embarrassed that they will be, that they will not sound good. We're not talking about professional speakers here. I don't have any sympathy for them. But people like your mom, ordinary people, I have tremendous sympathy for, because they might have this idea that they're going to fail somehow. So you want to make sure that your mom understands that number one, this isn't going to go on to like YouTube. This is not going to be like some embarrassed mom night. You want to give her a sense of the questions that you're going to ask her, so that she's comfortable with that. She has time to think about it, so that she can prepare her answers. Because you know, she's not going to write down. You're not going to have any problem with that. But you want to make sure that your intentions are clearly stated, and you want to make sure that your mom understands that what your intentions are, and that she can be who she is.
Just using Evoca, one of the things that I do when I'll do an interview, especially with my mother, they tend to be mic shy. So if you're sitting there with them with a recorder, they tend to clam up. And one of the nice things about using Evoca is you can call your mother on the telephone, bring the Evoca call recorder in, and say, "Gee, Mom, how are you? You know, where were you the day Pearl Harbor started? How did you first hear about it? Who did you talk with?" And they'll just start talking, and they'll go for 45 minutes. Just stream of consciousness. And because it's very easy for people to talk on a telephone. It's very unobtrusive.
Now, do we have this question and answer we're going to do with Mr.
Yes. Alec actually just went out to get a little libation, but he'll be back.
Okay. Any more questions while we wait?
Yeah. Are there any other questions? I had a chance to talk with a few of you, and you're really serious students here. This is great.
Yeah, I have one. When you're interviewing somebody and you kind of hit an uncomfortable subject for them, how do you respond to that?
Okay, well, first of all, the uncomfortable subject is not going to come very quickly in the interview. So if you're talking about an uncomfortable subject, and I do this all the time, it's the hard question. So you want to lead up to the hard question, and sometimes you're going to have to ask 4 or 5 or more sort of lead-up questions that have no point whatsoever, but to make your interview subject feel more comfortable with you. So if you're interviewing them about an uncomfortable subject, then you might want to prioritize your questions as to hard questions and easy questions, and put your hard questions last. That's the best thing that I can do for that, just to make your interview subject feel more comfortable. In addition to all the things that I mentioned before about, just being polite and nice, and, no judgment in your tone of voice, you want to look the person in the eyes, you don't want to be darting around your eyes. It's all about sometimes your body language too. And this is dealing with an in-person interview. If you're on the phone, it's a little bit more difficult, but in some ways easier too, because they're not looking at you. And there's a lot of times when it's just the microphone, like Tom said, it's just the microphone that is making them skittish, or it's just you there being skittish. But I would say to try to lead up to the more difficult questions. Like if you're asking somebody, for instance, about a traumatic childhood experience, you might want to ask them before the traumatic experience, well, tell me about where you grew up, tell me about your life, tell me about your first kiss, tell me about your first date, what was it like in high school, take me back to that time. Paint me a picture of what your town looked like, what were the leaves like in fall, whatever you can do to get them to be comfortable, even if and sometimes this is good material to use anyways, but even if that material is going to end up on the cutting room floor, you want to start out by getting them comfortable.
Well, thank you, Orlando. You've given us a wealth of information. We'll give you a round of applause. You're not leaving. You're not leaving.